Welcome. I'm Crispy, and this is my channel. I wanted to do this. I've been wanting to do this for a little while. Uh, one of the benefits slash nightmares of running games online now is that the game sessions are saved, and this is at the same time terrifying and exhilarating because it gives me the opportunity to look back at a game that I ran and see in living color just how it went. That's what I'm going to be doing on this video. I'm going to go through the first session of this Rising Sands game, not the whole session. I'm going to talk too much for that, but I've divided it up. I think I'll have three parts. This first part, I'm going to take a look at the beginning of the game. I'm looking particularly at how I did as the game master, whether or not I was able to stay true to the social contract that we had discussed earlier. And I also wanted to do this to provide some examples of what I pick out as stellar things that happened from the players, what the players were able to do that I thought was excellent. So let's get started on this. We're going to watch this together. This first one, the reason I selected this first timestamp is I want to highlight what Phil's doing with his character. His character's name is Maruk. So I want to look here at how Maruk is highlighting he's creating his home. He's a desert nomad. Listen to this description. I think it's very evocative. And this is just the player doing this through his character. So here we go.
Humble camp or tent. There's a very nice rug laid out on the bottom, keeping off the sand. They say, only a temporary shelter. Please have a sit. Would you like some water? You must be thirsty from your journeys. Already pouring.
Yes, please.
Shiny black cat drops to the floor.
Yeah, let's stop before the cat thing gets in here. So what I like about that is I like how the character, just through dialogue, he, as well as his description, he's painting this picture of his tent, this nomadic tent. He's got rugs down. He talks about he's decanting some water. You know, he's very hospitable to his guests, these new people that have arrived. I just think it was great. It's a good example to use to say, look, it's not the player asking me, what's in my tent? What does my tent look like? We had already brainstormed that together in a previous session that's not public. I do have the footage. I'm not sure if it's of any interest for anyone to see. But I have kept the footage because I think it'll be useful for me to go back and look at it. Let's go to this next one because this also pertains. This dovetails nicely into my comment. This was something that was brainstormed prior to the game starting. What was it going to look like? What was the housing like? What were these small, like his people, Phil's people? What were they like? Now, of course, in the game, I'm going to refer to them only by their character name and not by their name. But for the purpose of this video, I think it'll be less confusing if I just state the player's name. So just so we're clear on that. Let's go to this next one, and I want to show you this.
The Najima's tongue. I say, you trust this mage?
I reply in the same tongue. He's been good to our king. He doesn't seem to have the same nefarious agenda as other eye mage.
Now, what's great about this is they don't know that the mage, Alaric, he can speak it too. And he's just playing along like he doesn't respond. And I think this is great. This is just another example of that. We spent time brainstorming what were the languages. We talked about that when we were doing our world building together. And I thought this was really cool how two of the players, using their characters now to, hey, let's switch languages and see how the dynamic changes. I thought that was handled really well.
Look over at Alaric, trying to find any hint of recognition
I like how Phil says that Maruk looks over at Alaric. And I look over, I'm watching Rick. And what's Rick doing? He's looking at the ceiling, like, no. He knows very well, and he'll reveal that later.
Ignition in his eyes. I look back and I say, mages are not trusted here.
This is great because just from this brief dialogue, you're starting to get, we're fleshing out this idea that magic had, what is the role of magic in this world, and how do magic users relate to this people? Are they loved? Are they feared? Are they, you can kind of see that suspicion creeping in with Phil's character. I thought it was neat how they were switching languages, and they do that a little bit. It's great. Okay, so you can't talk in the tent for very long before I start to get antsy. This is maybe a bit of a shortcoming on my part, but this is me trying to push the action a little bit. An obstacle that I'm going to put in front of the players. The characters, they're not aware of this. This is not something that was been telegraphed. This just happens. What should we do? Okay, I got to back up. One of these days I'll learn how to cue this properly, but let's go back a little bit. You can see my furrowed brow. I'm thinking hard.
Najimi. And says,
okay, so my apologies. There's a lot of nomenclature here. Najimi is the language spoken by the Najima, the people that live in the Najm desert. Okay, I know that sounds super cheesy, but we loved it and we just went with it. All right, so my apologies. Let's keep going.
The Sultan's men, they found us. They've come to recruit for their army. What should we do?
So this is my method of trying to avoid, I'm trying to avoid a big exposition dump. Instead, I just have these recruiters. They're not recruiters. They're just going to press gang these nomads into the Sultan's army. But I'm showing that from the perspective of this NPC who I guess in a way he's communicating I'm communicating to the players that this people have been on the move because they've been avoiding the Sultan and his men.
Do. And he bows deeply to the in a heavily accented trader cant. Apologies, honored guests. Apologies.
Find somewhere to go. And I look at the other two men. I say,
he nods.
The king's men are here. And I don't know if I need to, or the Sultan's men are here. I don't know if I need to tell you. Stand up. Grabbing a sword that's sheathed off of a weapon rack.
I love when characters or when players use their characters to move in the world like this. And they describe things like that, where I say this to them and then I stand up and I go to draw my blade from where it was hanging on the tent flap, whatever it is. Like, I think that's so great. It helps everyone picture what's happening here. So the obstacle that's now in front of them is that there's someone from the Sultan, this representative of the Sultan's man has come. And that's a big problem for Maruk and his people. How are we going to deal with this? Well, the first thing that happens, maybe a bit of a mistake on my part. Let's look at it. Okay.
As soon as I see that, I look at the.
All right. So I again
viewed
this wrong.
Of Barak Sadif Zaman.
Okay, this is Sultan's man.
I call into conscripted service all of the fighting men of this tribe.
Before he gets to finish saying conscripted, or right at this moment, I chuck a dagger through the decree.
Now, okay, that's awesome. And if I were to use some kind of Wayback Machine, some time travel, I would have that just be described. Instead, I do something different. And I think it still works, but watch what I do.
As soon as I see that, I
Roll.
look at the.
Okay, so I should have just my first thing was like, that's cool. I really like what he did there. Does it really need a die roll? That's the question. It's not an attack on the NPC itself. It's something that's interacting more with the environment, but I do call for a roll here.
Alaric, I say, my friend, it's time to earn that trust. And I draw my sword.
Roll shoot.
Okay, so that's where I'm instructing. There was a little bit of a delay there. I noticed. I'm instructing the player for his character to roll shoot, which is the skill used for ranged attacks. He's thrown the dagger.
Or the dagger.
Okay, so he rolls terrible. You can see it on his face. It's just awful. So in this particular game, players will describe. We've decided beforehand. The players will describe when they fail a check, and I'll describe when they succeed a check. And you'll see later on, I messed this up again. But anyway, let's see. Phil knows that's a failure.
Failure.
But I tell him just to be sure.
So the dagger whizzes over his head.
Okay, so that's great. Now, I had some suggestions, excellent suggestions from others that watched this. That said, "Oh, wouldn't it have been awesome if he missed just slicing through the scroll that this Sultan's man was reading from, and he instead puts the dagger right into the middle of the chest of the guy, right, or something like that." But remember, I don't describe the failure. Phil, it's the player that will describe the character's failure. And he has done a good job. That's what he did.
I just yell out, "We do not acknowledge this."
Okay, so I wanted to show you that. It was I believe it was the first roll of the game. And it was a 2 on a 20-sided dice. So but I thought Phil did great. The reason I selected this was that I'm not convinced that it was the right moment to have the dice roll there. I'm not completely against it, but I think it may not have been necessary. Anyway, well, let's go to the next one. Yeah. Okay.
He looks over.
Elric comes out from the.
I'm going to call. I keep wanting to call him Alaric, but it's Alric, and I messed that up. I'm going to mess that up again and again and again. My apologies, Rick. To me, it's Alaric.
Flaps and says, in fluent Najia as well.
This is him exposing or revealing, not exposing. It's he's not exposing himself. This is Alaric revealing that he actually can speak this nomadic tongue. Excuse me.
Dear sir, we are in service of the King Leopold. We do not abide by your conscription.
He spits into the sand at the mention of King Leopold. That child? You swear allegiance to a boy?
Okay, I really liked how this turned out. We had talked about in our previous session, we were in the world building session, we had talked about the political structures of the two neighboring kingdoms, this desert, and then Viterre, which is where Rick's character and Max's character are from. And we talked about how there's a king, but he's too young, and so he has advisors, and that's where they're from. But what I like is that this is instead of just being me reading a wall of text, which is just no, thank you. Instead of doing that, we're revealing through dialogue between an NPC and the character things about the current state of the world. That there's a king, you're not from here, you're from a different place, that different place has a young king, young king is not held in very high regard by the Sultan's men. But instead of me just saying all of that, it just was revealed in the dialogue. I think it's outstanding.
And they laugh, all three of them.
When the boy has such powerful allies as such as I, yes. Pull forth my hands in crackling energy. Do you wish to test me? Says
I like that too. I really like that.
in a booming voice.
Their steeds all panic.
Notice
I think I may have, as I watched this again, I think that would have been a good time, because of where magic resides in the collective consciousness of this people. So the societal norms for magic in the desert. I would have been better to roll a morale check here, but I get the morale check thing all mixed up. I was confusing the morale check in Dungeon Crawl Classics with the morale mechanic in Worlds Without Number. And so my apologies, Kevin Crawford. I messed up your morale roll later in this session. I think this would have been a good place for that, though. I would have liked to have, because who knows, maybe they would have just panicked and ran off right then, like it was just be it. And I have a bit of a second guess here later on. I'm going to skip ahead. We're not going to spend any more time on this, but I just think that if we've done a decent job together of doing this world building before the game starts, in that session 0 or whatever you want to call it, then it's just natural that instead of having these long expositions read by me, it's the players can have their characters through normal dialogue interact with the world. All of a sudden I get like hiccups. How does that happen? I never get hiccups. Okay, let's go to the next one. I keep saying that. I should vary it up. Oh, okay.
I just put my hand up.
Okay.
Raises his hand.
I have to go back a little bit here. So just bear with me. And I'll explain what I'm doing here and whether or not I think it's successful. Maybe another 10 seconds. Yeah, 10 seconds.
3 men. One stops, raises his hand.
Okay, I'm not going to go back. I'll just describe it in a couple sentences. There's a standoff with these Sultan's men, and I've described some of these desert warriors moving stealthily through the sand behind the fabric of the tents, getting ready to do something about these Sultan's men. But then I describe them stopping and
looks in your direction.
I just put my hand up. Not signaling. They're signaling for them to hold.
He closes his hand into a fist, and all motion
And I go like
stops.
this.
what I was doing there, and whether or not it was successful, well, you can be the judge. Phil's character, Maruk, has leadership skills. He is a hero, a veteran warrior of the desert, respected by his people. And in this session, this was perhaps the only opportunity I had. Was there one more? No, I think there may have been one more. Actually, there is one more at the very end, or close to the end, where using NPCs in the world, I can encourage that, or at least give him the opportunity for that character to manifest that leadership quality. And I thought Phil did a great job with it. What I was intimating by describing these other warriors sneaking up on the emissaries of the Sultan was that there were resources at Maruk's disposal should he care to use them. And he decides, no, just sit down or don't engage. He gives them the signal. And because he's the leader. Of course, that's entirely appropriate. What I had in the background is all of the background. Getting my tenses all mixed up. It's kind of late here. It's been a long day. I had each of the characters, each of the players' character sheets, so that I could review. I mean, I was looking at the character sheets, reviewing them, seeing what skills they had chosen for their character, and then trying to provide obstacles wherein there was options for each of the three to use skills that were at their disposal. Now, it's not always going to work out that way, but I was just thinking, well, if you have leadership and you're only going to be around people that you've just met, then unless you're just using your force of character, your charisma, it's not going to really show through as well as if you have some of your own warriors that would follow his. And these are not level 0 type characters. These are all, I mean, this goes up to level 10 and they're level 5. We started at level 5. We decided that was a conscious decision and something we had talked about before the game started. So that's what I was doing there. And I thought Phil caught on real quick and then had Maruk show that leadership. He's kind of a reluctant leader, which I thought is also cool. Along those same lines, if I skip to this next one, which is just
Approaches.
a minute later,
Makes a savage
six. So this is just the first, like, what are we, 25 minutes into the game? This is really an opportunity for Phil to show his characters what makes his character tick. What's the motivation for the character? And you're going to get it here, partly because, well, just watch this scene play out. Watch this encounter with these other NPCs that I introduce.
Children in tow. The rest of the camp starts coming alive from where they were hidden. And a woman approaches the mighty gray stallion.
Hop off my horse. I say, Hoshi,
She
what are you doing
nods.
out? You're 6 weeks along. And I put my hand on her.
Okay, that was new. We had talked about his family, and that he had decided as when we were creating the characters, he said, "Oh, I want to have a big family." But he certainly didn't. He didn't at that point say that is. Oh, and my wife, yes, and my wife's expecting. This is something he just does spur of the moment. It's good.
Belly.
She rests her hand on it as well. Yes.
And of course, this is a character, an NPC that's directly connected to his character. So I'm not going to, why would you say such a thing? I'm just a little bloated. No, I'm not pregnant. No, I'm not going to contradict him. This is his character. I trust that he's not doing this for, to try to win the game or anything like that, of that sort. Here we go.
But those men from the Sultan, they'll be back, won't they? And she looks over at the tallest of the 6 children. And they'll take him. He's of age now,
Kito, come here.
He made up that name on the spot.
Calling over the largest of the boys.
Yes, father, he says, in Najimi.
You must be careful around these men. They will take you.
His hand falls to a dagger in his belt. I am ready.
You're strong, my son.
I will
But
fight
you're all-
those that pervert the eternal wind.
Okay, that reference there, I'm just trying to reinforce things that we had discussed about the setting and the what is it, the dominant faith of the desert, and why that's creating a rift between the party and the desert people and the Sultan, who's seen as a bit of a heretic of the way of the desert. Now, I understand that that's never going to come through really for those of you that are just watching this as something to do. But for those, because I'm still not convinced, and I don't think any of us are really convinced that that role playing in a role playing game is for an audience. It's really for us. It's for the four of us, and so so I tell you these things as you're watching this, as I'm reviewing how things went, and I say I see this as a big win. But anyone that's just watching this on YouTube, they're not going to have the slightest clue as to like what are they even talking about. But at any rate, I guess I'm rambling. Nothing new.
But these guards will not come for your little brothers and sisters or your mother. But they will use them against you to encourage your cooperation. When you see them, it's best to hide with the other men. And
But
I
he
wave my
starts
hand to signal the hidden soldiers.
They rise, sand falling from their hot weather clothes, perfectly camouflaged in the
All right. Okay. I don't know how anyone watches this at normal speed. I keep on wanting to speed it up to 2 times speed. Okay. Let's go to this. I want to highlight something that Max does here, which I think is great.
Then I
it
put it back.
sloshes around. That water doesn't taste as good.
Oh,
Horatio
okay.
says.
I'm way too tight. Let's go back. What this is now this is an in-character game, and in character for the definition we're using means that I'm not there as a game master that you can just ask questions to whom you could just ask questions. I can't answer unless I have some vehicles by which to answer. That's not to say that you don't have senses that you can engage. And here, Max is asking a question, but he's doing so in character. Watch how he does it.
The volume of water I have left.
Okay, I'm still not. Man, what is wrong with my queuing? Okay.
The desert sand and a group of people ready to move out.
Sitting on my horse, I take my water skin, I drink a little sip of water, and I visibly kind of gauge the volume of water I have left.
Yeah, so that's asking it's asking me a question, but he's doing it through the senses of the character. So the character's just like you would in real life, I suppose. If you had a flask and take a little sip and then kind of gauge how heavy is this? Kind of want to hear the water.
Then I
It
put it
sloshes
back.
around. That water doesn't taste as good.
Now I try to answer with the cat, but I could have just said, because it wouldn't be inappropriate for me to like, I'm not technically breaking character if he is using his senses and saying I slosh the water around and to gauge how much is left. If I were to just say a half full, or the water sloshes around in the flask, it's half full. Like that's fine. That's fine. And it's a smart way of him saying, like, what kind of supplies do we have before we head out into the desert? So yeah, kudos on that. It's pretty easy to say, how much water do I have on me? Instead of, hey, well, what I do if I was that character in that moment and I had no one I could ask other than myself, how would I gauge that? And that's what he did. So good job. And sticking with Max here, and I'm sure I'm way too tight on the.
But it is definitely preferable.
The Great Mother protect us.
Okay. What Max is doing, again, the casual watcher of this who wasn't in our world building wouldn't recognize that he's Paul Vinus, his character, is displaying his belief. He's reinforcing that. He's becoming what I would call a more high resolution character. And that's an excellent thing that to happen. Let's see if anything else happens there, or if it's just that.
I
It's just that. Yeah.
jingle my reins.
So he said something though that he'll repeat, and he'll reference this great mother idea, and that's good because it's a very important part of his character, and he's allowing that to come through as a more higher resolution version of the character. I do something here. I don't think it works.
Some campfire smoke.
I'm just okay. Let's go back. Come on. This is painful at 1x speed.
Distance. In the same direction.
Oh, come on.
Take lead.
Just riding along.
It's a beautiful beast you got there.
Try to
Robert.
ride alongside the other two, so we keep like a 3.
Off in the distance, in the same direction which the 3 riders had taken when they left with alacrity from the nomadic village. Some campfire smoke wafts up into the.
I'm alluding to an potential obstacle as a foreshadow, and the foreshadowing is that some army on the move, a campfire, the Sultan's men, just over in that direction. Potentially an issue. Maybe it'll become an issue later on. I'm just seeding that as just to put it out there. A bit of a mistake happens here.
The almost cloudless sky. The horses managed just fine along these old trade routes, long dried out riverbeds and creeks, as the horses continue at a comfortable pace. But it's hot. The sun is merciless. The shade is very few. Flies from time to time swarm around, causing some consternation to the cat.
What time of day is it? I'm trying to communicate that it's afternoon maybe, but the sun's high overhead.
Why couldn't I be a white cat? It's hot.
If we were doing this in the heat of day,
But you are doing it in the heat of day.
you wouldn't be privileged enough to talk about it. Which
So I'm imagining that Phil saying it's still hot, but he maybe my description wasn't on point. I would say my description. This is maybe a lesson I should take from this. I'm going to write this down. The problem is when I get too loquacious. Is that a word? I think so. That's the describing the problem. Actually, is that when I try to be too flowery in a description, or if the narrated description is too long, then it's entirely normal and perhaps probable that my players won't catch one of the key details. I've given too many details. It could have, if I was maybe a little tighter on that, and then because Phil is saying, well, it's a good thing you're not doing this in the day, but in my mind, it is the day.
Fortunately, during the day, we can take one of the underground routes.
Now, it may sound like he's creating out of thin air the underground routes. He's not. We had discussed that again as part of this world building exercise that we did. And I'm not, myself personally, I don't know that I would be okay with that being just just a creation of the player. Oh yeah, there's this terrible desert and it's death to be out here in the full sun, and it's trackless dunes as far as the eye can see. Oh, but don't worry about it. There's a secret underground, like what is that like the old Mario games where you go down in the pipes and then it warps you ahead. So it's so he's not just creating that. That is something we had discussed as a feature of the mysterious desert, these underground passages.
I heard
Underground.
about those routes.
But the time issue, the time of day issue, I think the fault for that lies in my description. If the description was tighter, not as verbose, more concise, I don't think it would have necessarily been a problem. The other thing I could have done there, which I chose not to in the moment, what I could have done is I could have had the cat, who's my NPC in the scene, the Horatio, the spirit animal from Max's character. I could have had the cat say, like, is this guy okay? Like, the sun is beating down on me and he thinks it's at night. Are we sure this is a good guide? He can't even tell that it's light out. And then that would have been a cue for Phil that you got the time of day wrong, or I'm not okay with you advancing past the obstacle of the heat of the afternoon sun by just advancing the clock. But I don't think that Phil was trying to do that. I think that there was just some confusion, and that confusion more than likely originates with me, as most confusion does. Bit of a mistake. But in the moment, instead of doing that, instead of correcting via NPC or something like that, I thought, no, that's fine. Just it'll work out. So is it a mistake? Yeah, it's a time error, but we're not going to worry about it. Now, just a comment. I would absolutely worry about that time mistake if there was something really critical that relied on the sun being out or the sun being down. And then I'd have to make sure somehow, hopefully in character if I can, that that Phil's not correct. It's still, the sun's still up. It hasn't set over the horizon yet. Okay. This is it's a notice check. I'm not sure about notice checks. I think that they're necessary. They should have them. They have notice skills, especially Phil's character in the desert has notice skills. And it makes sense if you have skills in that there's opportunities to roll it. And I call for this notice check. Guide. And he's going to roll. Failure.
Blinded by the sun.
See, notice he got the hint that the sun is out by now. So good on you, Phil. I just noticed that. Alaric. Carrion birds. Now, what happened there is Rick, seeing that I had called for a notice check, he had rolled his notice check, which happens to also be a trained skill of his, and he actually got the success, but not Phil. Did you see how Phil he described Maruk's failure? That he's suffering from a bit of sun blindness because of the being out in the desert. And then I described the success from Alaric when he rolled. And I'm assuming, and I think it's a safe assumption, that roll, which happened at the same time or close to the same time that Phil made his roll, is for the same notice check. Now, we didn't specify this. In some games, I think that's how should I say this? In order for something like that to happen, you have to make that decision beforehand. Are players permitted to make their own skill checks, or, as is usually how I do things, you typically would so either you do that and that's fine, everyone's okay with that, you can just go ahead and roll, or are all rolls called by the game master? I have a bit of a preference, I have to be honest. I have a bit of a preference for rolls being called by the game master, and the reason for that is because I want, in many instances, because one of my principal jobs as the game master is to set the difficulty level for tasks, and if the task is trivial, then I'd rather not waste any time rolling the dice. If the task isn't trivial, and this is why I'm not sure that this nose check was needed. If you're in my mind works like this. If I'm in the desert and it's the sun is shining, or it's getting low on the horizon, and there's a bunch of vultures circling overhead, do you need to roll to see those? That's like, it should be obvious, shouldn't it? So that's why I'm not in love with this call that I made here to roll for a notice check. You can see that's exactly what it is, as I described the successful check for Rick's character, Alaric.
Circle high overhead, riding the thermals above the few trees here.
Looks like the vultures above hinting.
Let's go to the next one.
There.
I stopped my.
Okay, so a hostile enemy approaches, and this is a chance. So a couple things happened in this. I think we'll watch a few minutes of this. Just maybe 2 minutes will be enough. That shows that Rick is increasing the resolution of his character, which is a magic user, and I miss a cue here. This is not on the player. This is definitely on the game master.
My horse, and I say we're just here to water our horses. We're gonna be on our way.
Those
What
are
are you
nice
cooking?
horses.
Like, stabilize my horse a little bit.
The horse snorts again, paws its front hoof, pawing at the sand, wanting to move forward. Horatio jumps back
Easy, Mirash.
to Paulvina's horse.
I whispered to Horatio, go over count how many are there.
I have no idea why I cued it there.
Of them are there. Come tell me back.
The
What's
black
for
cat.
supper, Anaki?
Okay, so I'm waiting for Rick to jump in.
Darts off the horse and rushes.
Okay, so I'm doing something wrong here already. I didn't write a note on this, but I don't think it's an efficient game use of time for me to respond after every player's turn. It just slows things down too much. As I'm watching this, well, first of all, it should be double speed, but as I'm watching this, it's too slow, in part because I am the one that's responding after like Phil says something as his character, I respond. Max says something as his character, I respond. Then I respond as the cat too. Where it would have been faster if they both say, if I refrained from jumping in after each turn. It's much better and I get a little better at this the next session. I still make the mistake, but it's good practice. This is one of this maybe illustrates why it's important for me, or I find it so valuable to go over these again, because then I'll see something. I'm like, oh wait, why was I saying something? I should have just let them go through, and then I'll say afterwards.
Which is around. Well, there's meat on the menu.
You're mistaken.
2 more men, similarly garbed, come out from behind the trees. Blood stains some of their clothing. Some flies buzz around.
I put my hand up. And I say,
More
"If the-"
slaves.
I put my hand up and I say, if the wind wills it, we can kill each other. However, there's enough water here for all of us.
Yes, there is enough water, he says. We're more
Then
interested in you.
Elric says,
Blades
enough of
rasp
this.
against-
So I can. I'm glad Rick jumped in there because Rick, we kept skipping you here, and that's on me because I kept on interrupting, or interrupting the flow because I'm responding after every player's turn instead of waiting and then doing mine turn along. Anyway, so I like how Rick handles this here.
scabbards as they pull out their blades.
Elric positions his hands. A massive energy bolt starts coming forth and invigorates the man speaking to us.
He rolls
and I draw my sword.
as the arcane energy splashes over him.
Okay, so I should have waited. I made a couple mistakes here. The first mistake I made is he has to roll, I believe, with the spell he was using, and he cued me in on the spell he was using because he with the way he described it. So I should have known what it was, and that's not special coding that we've done beforehand. That's just the name of the spell, and these spells have very evocative names or unusual names, which I actually, the more that we use this, the more I like that. But I should have waited here because I kind of miscue things.
He howls enraged and in pain.
21.
21 damage, like just straight up murders him. Oh, yeah. And now I finally roll.
Ooh. Failure.
And I
me.
fail my roll for the save for half
The
damage.
bolt tumbles
He's nuked.
across him, searing his skin.
All right, so Phil isn't out of order here because we had said Rick, when we had talked about the game, we had said that and this is a little confusing, and I think this didn't work very well, so we'll have to take a look at this in the social contract. When it was my failures, remember in the social contract, I talked about how players narrate their failures. Holy smokes, I've been going 47 minutes. Well, if any of you watch this, congratulations. You've made it this far. The failures that are described by the players include the failures of my NPCs. So my NPC failed his saving throw to shrug off some of this arcane damage. That's why Rick starts describing what happens to him when he failed, rather than me describing the success of the magic spell. So that's the confusion, right? And that's entirely a confusion of my own creation because I confused things when we discussed like who describes the failures, who describes the successes. We're going to talk about. We'll clean that up here. That's just something we're going to have to clean up a little bit. And if he's going to be describing my failure, then I needed to cue Rick somehow. I just maybe say it. I think that wouldn't be too disruptive. Just to say that's a fatal failure. So he would know if he's going to describe it, he would know that's it. The guy's gone. Can describe the magic blowing a hole in his chest cavity and he falls over dead. Instead, I know he's been nuked because I looked at his hit points and it's not even close. But Rick doesn't know that. And there's that confusion. Okay, it's a player success. Do I narrate that? Or is it a failure and the players narrate the failure? And that's just my own, that's a mistake of my own creation.
And
he howls enraged. and then with surprise looks down at the massive hole in his chest cavity.
Okay, so that's me trying to remedy the situation. But what that did though is it had us both describe the action, and the descriptions don't line up perfectly because I didn't give that information to the player so that the character's action would be more accurately described, or the effects of his ability. All right, we're almost done. Holy smokes. That's a lot. Do I skip over that one? No, I guess we'll just go through it. We went through those
Yeah,
two.
Children of all
you.
children.
Smells terrible. All right, Horatio is trying to introduce something new here, and I'm Horatio. I role play the cat. Something just bit me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's me using the NPC to introduce a new obstacle or something new in the world around in the immediate area of where the players are. What's happening here is that Max's character is examining the dead corpse of this Anak warrior.
Yeah. Little flea.
Horatio climbs up, perches on his usual spot on your shoulders, and looks down, baring his teeth at the sand, where shiny black beetles are emerging from the sand and crawling.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to show, is that I was trying to use the NPC to introduce this new threat. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't necessary. Could have just described the sand shifting underneath the feet and shiny insect carapaces revealing themselves. That probably would have been enough. I'm trying to give a little bit of personality to the spirit animal, which Max is a pretty good sport over that, because I took way more liberties than I probably should have. But he said he's okay with it. So, all right. Last thing. Oh boy.
They don't make for very comfortable sleep.
All right. By this time, I'm thinking we should probably skip time here. We're not going to role play sleeping through the night. We're going to travel through the night, or in other words. So I'm waiting to move that along, but I'm glad I'm listening here. I'm getting better at listening to the players to see when they want to skip ahead, because we had again discussed how we wanted to handle that, and that's one of the things that had come up, is that it's the players will decide that we're all going to be traveling, and then they'll be quiet for a moment, and then I know, okay, then we can fast forward a little bit. What? Why didn't that work? Okay.
Then perhaps we should keep our heads to the wind, head on towards our destination.
Yes, let's make the best use of the night.
Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, they're going to travel through the night, getting ready for a time, a little bit of a fast forward.
And I go grab my horse and mount it. Gentlemen,
I slice up some of one of the large hawks. I leave the other one.
See, because this is good. So I'm glad at this point. I'm glad that I haven't skipped at all, because Phil isn't done. Like, Maruk's not done in this immediate area, this oasis where they had fought these orc slavers, whatever they were.
It's kind of call out, "I'm leaving one for you."
The chittering sounds, a few more adventurous birds hop over, anxious to get their fill.
Take it off. Don't hear the orcs.
No pun intended.
So I just toss the hawk away from the scarabs for the birds.
They caw and gather around, flock around it, getting as much as they can before the sand comes alive with shiny black and iridescent shells of That's some foreshadowing there, people. Yep. Beetles as they rise up to take this meat and crunch it down their mandibles.
Lots of
The
life
stars are
in there.
brilliant as the sun, the final rays of the sun go crest the dunes of the Najim Desert, and the temperature at first so incredibly hot now starts to cool rapidly. The horses move easier in the coolness, only stumbling somewhat with the uneven ground.
Now I'm almost moving the characters here. So I'm on the line and I can see, look at that expression. That's someone who's riding right that line. Am I moving the characters or not?
Just to take care of this, to take advantage of this hour, you can run your horses a little faster before the cold gets too hard.
Turn toward
Perhaps.
Horatio.
Pick up the pace of the horse.
Okay, so now he's moving the horse. Good. Okay, I was nervous because I was, oh, did I just move the characters? I think I might have just moved the characters.
I said that's probably gonna suit you better as well, my friend.
I maneuver my horse closer towards Pulvinus. Horatio, let me see that wound.
Go, Max. I don't know if you'll watch this, but in my table at my in-person table, I have a rule against 3-syllable names. I was like, no one's gonna have a 3-syllable name. You just do. So anyway, I just think it's funny. I think most of you, it's a fine name. It's just, I thought I would mention that.
Horatio jumps over from
Okay, so
One-
this is. Oh, I'm going to stop it here, but because we're almost on the hour, and it's tough to watch oneself run a game for an hour, or in this case, almost 3. But is it almost 3? I don't. Whatever it is, it can be tough, but incredibly valuable. As I look at this and I watch this again and I study what happened, and I'm listening carefully to how the turns went, how the co-creation, where it did exist, how did it work in this instance. While there was some co-creation, some of that kind of 4D sauce that we put on things, is the main thing here is that we had a successful in-character session. And I want to go through that, tear it apart, look at things that worked, things that didn't work, where there was some confusion. I've identified a few of those areas, and I've got a lot more to go through. But this has really helped me, hopefully, become better at running games in this style, and that's what I'm interested in doing. I really hope that this has been somewhat helpful to anyone who's watched it. Thank you for your patience as I ramble on into the late hours of the night talking about this. Really appreciate my players for their efforts, and shout them out. So I'll tag their channels below. Please check them out. And I will look forward to having you on the next one. And hopefully it won't be too long before I can get the rest of these up so I can get caught up. I'm really interested in catching up on these, as I find it so valuable. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.